So I'm going to just give you a very kind of very short introduction on, say, big data management and the data fairness from the perspective of climate science. And this is kind of going to be the bridging talk between what Ms. Sylvie said and what Stefan is going to talk about after me. So in terms of the big data, I'm just going to very shortly just tell you about the evolution of the data volumes which are produced in CMIPs. So the actual the numbers, they differ depending on the data we take. But if you take, for example, data from CMIP3, it was about 40 terabytes. Then going on to CMIP5, it was increased to about 2 petabytes actually already. And then if you go to CMIP6, it was actually also been mentioned by Sylvie in her talk, but there are estimates between actually 18 petabytes with upper bound of up to 18 petabytes. So this is actually a very large amount of data. And of course, if you think about actually wanting to analyze it, it can be hard. But actually, so what the talk is about today is that the data volume itself, of course, storing it is actually not the real issue. So I mean, of course, it's a lot of data, but it can be stored. That's fine. But the main point is actually that, because you are here now, is that it's the global and interdisciplinary demand for the data which is the challenge. So actually, everybody in the world essentially actually wants to use this data, and the data transfers, which we had the one graphic by Sylvie in our talk, is that we transfer these hundreds of terabytes every month. At some point, it's not going to scale anymore. Now, the point is here that this whole structure we're talking about today is about data reuse. So in the end, it's important to know that data which is produced in CMIP is actually designed for the large-scale data sharing and data reuse. And this can actually only happen if they are actually managed in a good way. So data management is a very important, essential part of CMIP. And because, so that it actually works, but there are certain actually rules which have been kind of imposed on the community by standard documents and resources which actually outline the data naming, the names of the variables, the citations, the data file formats, and these kind of things. And these are all documented in extensive documents in resources which are available actually online. And sometimes, you know, the community is really annoyed that these standards are so extensive, but in order for things to work, data have to be comparable. Now, again, the bridge to the fair data, actually nowadays, when you talk about data sharing and data reuse, these so-called fair principles come and they appear, and you have to know actually what they are. The fair principles, I'm going to just brush over them here because otherwise it'll be very complicated. The fair principles, but they were actually introduced in 2016. And since then, they've actually made an astonishing career, because actually, by now, essentially, but no matter what you do in terms of research, essentially all projects want to get funded. So, for example, by the European Commission, they're required to adhere to the principles, and they are the F is for findable. Data have to be findable. Accessible, and the data have to be able to access in an easy way. They have to be interoperable, and they have to be reusable. So actually, I won't go into these ones in detail, but I'm just going to explain actually what this means in terms of the ESGF, of ENES, and for climate data. So very shortly, maybe I talked a lot about the ESGF and the infrastructures which we in the global community which we use to distribute and actually have the data available for everybody. So climate data in terms of the ESGF and ENES and other infrastructures which we promote today here, they are findable in a global way say, for example, in the ESGF, and they're almost actually always assigned a DOI, which means that they can be persistently found in the web by kind of everybody. Now the A is also very important here. So it's the access, and the access to data is provided by the ESGF. It's open source. It's free, and it actually uses standard protocols, and is also which kind of makes it very straightforward to everybody to actually access the data. Interoperable. So in this kind of context, because I was actually saying that the CMIP data which are provided in the ESGF are standardized, but they're all the documents which document actually what's the file name, what are the standards, what are the coordinates, what are the units, and all these kind of things. They're in place, and but they're also accessible actually online, and they can read, which in a sense is this interoperability thing. And now the most important part is the R, it's the data usability. So because the F, the A, and the I, and the standards are in place, which are imposed in these big documents, the data of the climate community, say the Codex, ESGF data in general, are usable, and because they actually adhere to the standards, and they are also equipped with a rich the metadata and plus the history of the creation. So the city mentioned the ES docs, and the ES doc is actually extremely important to have the documentation of the model results of the creation and of the data and content, and actually all together, and this makes the data in the ESGF and ENES actually fair. So and just with this fair data, and because they are actually managed in the way they are managed, it allows us to build reproducible a workplace for the Earth, the sciences, by actually using the online data analysis. Because think, if the data actually wouldn't be actually managed in this good way, actually everything we talk about today, it just wouldn't be possible. And finally, by actually using these the online services which they talk about today, and these actually will enable your actually own the own work which you do to be actually fair and be documented with history and provenance, and essentially that's the end of my talk. And I look forward to hearing what Stefan has to say about the services. Thanks very much.